Good morning, everyone. I have 9 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the One Voice for Volusia meeting. My name is Carrie Baird. In lieu of our traditional agenda today, we're hosting a special meeting by United Way focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're really excited to have an interesting dialogue today and some opportunity for us to talk in small groups. So first, I want to introduce our moderator today for today's panel, Dr. Cheryl Weems. Dr. Weems serves as an Associate Vice President of the Mary Carl College of Workforce and Continuing Education at Daytona State College. She has a long-standing record of dynamic leadership in higher education and has characterized her career by a sustained focus and commitment to economic and workforce development. Dr. Weems is a member of the Volusia Manufacturing Association, Career Source Pathways Committee, and a practitioner council and the Practitioners Council for Team Volusia. She currently serves on the boards of United Way and the Ormond Beach YMCA. She has served as a member of the Ormond Beach Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Weems is a recent graduate of a professional leadership program offered through Daytona Regional and Ormond Beach Chambers of Commerce. So welcome, Dr. Weems, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Carrie, and welcome this morning to all of you. And thank you, Carrie, and the One Voice for Volusia for inviting this presentation by the United Way. I can share with you that as an organization, the United Way has focused intently on diversity, equity, and inclusion over the past year. And we have embraced this initiative and what is commonly called DEI. We have embraced this as a movement rather than a moment in time. We have learned that there is really no prescription, and our goal has been to promote curiosity, to inspire, and to aspire. And so one of our objectives in a long line of objectives was to host a community conversation. So here we are this morning, realizing one of the objectives that we identified for the United Way. I challenge you in terms of listening to the interaction and engaging in the chat to determine for yourself the value of a DEI conversation. And to help us along our way, we have invited 3 panelists to share best practices in relation to how they and their companies have approached a DEI initiative. So I'll introduce the 3 panelists, and then I'll talk a little bit about what this morning will look like for us as we move through this hour. So first, I'd like to introduce Alpa Bander, and she is the Director of Team Resources, Total Rewards, Compensation, and Benefits for Brown & Brown. Apta is the Director of the Team Resources, Total Rewards, Compensation, and Benefits for Brown & Brown, and they're based in Daytona Beach, Florida. She joined Brown & Brown in 2015, and she has responsibility for encompassing employee benefits, executive compensation, equity plan management, retirement plans, and general compensation, including the strategy, design, and implementation of total rewards and financial wellness initiatives. Ms. Bander also leads the Brown & Brown Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Task Force. Before joining Brown & Brown, she held the position of Manager of Accounting Services at Newport Group, and one of the leading retirement service companies in the US. Prior to that, she held the position of Accounting Manager at an industrial firm. She's licensed in the state of Iowa as a certified equity professional. She earned her MBA from Maharishi University of Management in Fairfield, Iowa. She holds a Master of Taxation degree from Florida Atlantic University and a Bachelor of Commerce with honors from Delhi University in India. She's a member of the American Institute of CPAs, the National Association of Stock Plan Professionals, World at Work, the Morgan Stanley at Work Client Advisory Board, and the Charles Schwab Retirement Plan Services Client Advisory Board. So welcome, Apta. Our second presenter this morning is Jennifer Nedelkov. and she's the chief executive of the House Next Door. Jennifer is a licensed marriage and family therapist who serves in the role of CEO of the House Next Door. With the board's support and hard work of the HND staff, inclusivity has been a top priority. Her journey with that organization started over 3 years ago, with step one being the acknowledgement that diversity is a fact and inclusivity is an act. Jennifer has helped lead the HND family to do hard work, ensuring that all policies, procedures, and practices are indeed inclusive. The formula for success has been learning into the uncomfortable conversations and committing to do better tomorrow than we did yesterday. Welcome, Jennifer. And our third panelist is Courtney Edgecombe, and Courtney serves as the president of the United Way of Volusia-Flagler Counties. Courtney is a graduate of Stetson University and Troy University. She began at the United Way in 2013 as a resource development manager and has since held positions responsible for the United Way's transition to community impact, volunteer engagement, marketing, and fundraising. Courtney was recognized as one of Daytona Beach News Journal 40 Under 40 Young Nonprofit Professionals of the Year in 2020 and an Influential Woman in Business nominee in 2018. She's a member of the DeLand Breakfast Rotary, a member and active volunteer at Stetson Baptist Church, and serves on various boards and communities throughout the two-county area. Courtney resides in DeLand with her husband, is enjoying her life as a mom, bless her soul, with 4 boys. So good for you, Courtney. So welcome, panelists. And this morning, to you all, what we'll do is we'll guide the conversation using 3 questions, and I'll ask each panelist to engage in those 3 questions. We'll spend about 10 minutes in each of those areas so that we can move through the agenda with fluidity. And then after we finish hearing from our panelists, then we will invite any comments from the chat. And we'll allow a few minutes post that portion of the program to review or to address any of the questions or concerns or compliments that we see in the chat. Following that, we're going to break out into small groups, and we'll be in our small group sessions for about 10 minutes, where you'll have an opportunity to reflect on what it is that we've heard this morning, perhaps share your own journeys, and clearly, in your own way, have a few of those aha moments. I'm sure you'll come away with, I didn't know that, I never realized that, that makes sense. Why would we do something like that? But those would be the aha moments. And then after your small group sessions, we'll come back, and then we will have a chance at the end of the program to share and to share some of those aha moments that you all have posted in the chat. So having said that, let's get started. So let's start with Courtney. And Courtney, why don't you share with us how you started your DEI initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for having us here today. And I'm excited to share about what my team has done. So when we started our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, we began last summer in 2020, following all of the unrest that was going on in the country, doing some check-ins with our team and finding that people were just really upset and needed an outlet and a safe place to be able to have conversations. And when I say that our journey began with one person, I mean that we had one person on our staff who said, this is really important to me. Can I please take some initiative? Can I start a group? Can we have these conversations? And we said, absolutely, please, kind of take over wherever you want to. So that one person was able to start a group. We had, as soon as the question was asked, would you like to join a diversity, equity, and inclusion work group? About half of our staff of 16 at the time joined, jumped right on board and wanted to be a part of that. We all started with learning. So trying to share some experiences together and build trust as a group, trying to discuss different topics and have a safe place to share. And then from there, we've been doing more of the, internal self-reflective type activities so that you get a really good chance to grow as a person. So when I say that we started with one person, I literally mean that we had one person who said, this is something that is exciting and interesting to me, and can I please try it? And we said, absolutely. It's now grown. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion work group meets on a weekly basis, and it's now grown to include board members, as well as other community members who have an interest and an expertise in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're looking to add in our next level of volunteer leadership through our affinity groups as well to be a part of the conversation. So.
Excellent, thank you. Alka, why don't you share with us what you've done at Brown & Brown?
Absolutely. And Courtney, I have to say, it only takes one person to start a movement, right? So that's great. And Dr. Weems, if you don't mind, I'm going to answer this in two parts, at a personal level and then professional. So first, personally, for me, the journey started 22 years ago when I immigrated into this country. It became very obvious that I was on a foreign land where, whether it was my accent, whether it was the way I presented myself, culturally, I just didn't fit. Over the years, I have worked with many people that have made fun of my accent, that have made fun of my hair, my jewelry. I just have come across people that have told me to go back to the country where I came from. All of that has cultivated this passion that I have today for diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And now talking about professionally for Brown & Brown, I joined the company 6 years ago, and I knew at the time Brown & Brown has always valued diversity in thinking, diversity in background, diversity in decision-making. Diversity is just core to our meritocracy. So while we had always thought of diversity in a really important way, it was in early 2020 that we knew it was time to be more deliberate in our efforts. And so we formed a DIB task force to guide us in our strategy and future planning. The task force came together. We included a couple of members of our operating committee as our leadership sponsors. That was very important. So we had the buy-in from the top, from the very beginning. And then on the task force, we appointed a few leaders from the business. The first thing that we did when we formed the task force was we embarked on internal and external listening campaign. We undertook extensive data collection. We had one-on-one conversations with our teammates. We sent out a survey to all of our teammates. We got over 6,500 teammates that responded to the survey. We got over 1,000 comments in our survey responses. And believe me when I say this, our task force read every single one of those comments. We also did peer company benchmarking, and we talked to inspirational companies in the industry where we thought their program inspired us. We also engaged with sector experts. We're not an expert in DIB, so we went out and talked to a couple of experts just to really understand, how do you start a program? What are some of the lessons that we learned? And then based on those, how can we move our program forward? So I can say in our case, the DEI journey started somewhat deliberate, but it was also very organic at the same time.
Excellent. And I hope that as we're listening to our panelists, we're taking notes. I know I am, so hopefully you'll be inspired to do the same. So Jennifer, please share with us what's going on at the house next door.
Good morning. This for me is a very, very exciting topic. For me, this is a core issue. And in 2018, in the fall of 2018, I actually took over this position from our long-term CEO who had been with us for a decade and a half. And this was one of the movements that was very important to me that I wanted to see integrated into the agency. And so lucky for me, I was able to get buy-in from our board and from our top executive level. And so what we did essentially is we committed to, we're not going to only do this, but we're going to commit to doing this with self-love, with self-reflection, with patience. And our biggest lesson, I believe, in the beginning was leaning into the uncomfortableness, meaning you can't have comfortable conversations and grow and learn as a person. And working in social services, we're all aware of that. So we're going to get uncomfortable. We are going to make mistakes, but we're committed to this. And so lucky for me, we had that. I think it is a little bit easier. I think we all have the advantage in being in social services. We have teammates, we have coworkers, we have boards that are volunteers who all have a heart to do better. And the belief that when we know better, we do better. And so our journey started with a lot of experiential, hands-on. It was extremely immersive. We used a multimedia platforms. We also all committed to reading the book, So You Want to Talk About Race. It's a very, it's a good read. And essentially every week a chapter was read, and then we would come back together as a group, and there was between an hour and 2 hours, depending on what exactly the topic was for that week, and we would discuss that as a management team. When we got through that book, so we're about a year into our journey, then the George Floyd situation happened, and it was like, okay, we don't know if we're ready. We really don't know if we're ready to take this to the next level within our organization. You know, have we done enough work on our own? But the moment was then, it needed to happen. And so how we proceeded forward was we brought in our supervisor team, and we gave them the same opportunity. They worked through the same book. They read a chapter every week, and then there would be the discussion about it, the reflection about it, and always time afterwards for any individual one-on-one reflection or processing that needed to happen. And then we've just continued to work that down since then. So we have board engagement, executive level, supervisor level, leadership level. And June of this past year, it was rolled out to the entire staff. So that's in our journey, that's kind of where we are.
So thank you, Jennifer. I'm hearing common themes, timing. You know, there's no calendar time to initiate these types of discussions, but the environment, the conditions surrounding your environment prompt the right time in which to move into in this direction. And the other thing that I'm hearing is from all of you is that commitment is critical. Rather than just compliance, I'm hearing you say that you have an organizational commitment to addressing your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So it's very encouraging. Thank you for that. Let's continue the discussion, and let's talk a little bit about some of the most challenging and rewarding parts of the journey. So Abdul, can you share with us what some of those challenges have been and some of those rewards?
Absolutely, Dr. Weems. So I will say there were two things that I could probably say were the hardest for our group. We always had the buy-in from the top leadership. That was not an issue at all. We knew our teammates wanted it, so that wasn't an issue. But any kind of initiative, it's typically the middle management where you kind of get stuck. Is people just want to, hey, I'm here to sell insurance. Why are we talking about this, right? That's my job. Why are we talking about this here at work? So that probably was a challenge, is that middle management group. And then I would say, even on the task force, the hardest part for our group was to get aligned in our thoughts and strategy, okay? As an example, there was a group of teammates that thought that the solution to DEI or DIB lied in recruiting diverse candidates. As we launched our external listening campaign, we heard from several companies that it's very important to build a strong foundation of inclusion and belonging, because if you don't have that and you just go out and start recruiting diverse talent, what ends up happening is you're gonna have to build that foundation anyhow, eventually. And in the meantime, that diverse talent starts leaving because they don't feel like they belong. So if you just go out with recruiting first, when what you don't have is that foundation, you don't have the resource group for your diverse talent. So our approach was to start focusing on inclusion and belonging first before we address the recruitment strategy. So that's where we got some pushback initially. But once we explained our approach, we got the buy-in, so that worked out. But then I think the second part of your question is what was most rewarding or what was the easiest part? And I want to share with everyone, probably our most successful achievement thus far has been the launch of a Culture Day floating holiday across the organization. So as a task force, we were getting requests from teammates that wanted Juneteenth as a holiday or Veterans Day as a holiday. And we came up with this idea that would allow teammates one day of their choice to take as a floating holiday anytime during the year. So for someone like me, Diwali may be a culture day floating holiday. Somebody may want a day of Hanukkah as their floating holiday, or Juneteenth. We were able to get that immediate approval from senior leadership, and we launched that floating holiday effective 2022, and that has been very well received by our teammates.
Great. Well, thank
The
you.
last time that I heard Abba speak and she spoke about that, we had brought that back to our team and said, hey, this I think would be a really great way for us to address maybe some of the issues or the needs that other people are having. And when you think about like always getting Christmas off, but what if somebody doesn't celebrate Christmas and instead we're ignoring something that is really valuable to them? So that's something, Abba, that in the 2 months since the last time I heard you speak, we have already put it into our policy and are moving forward with it.
That's excellent, Courtney.
Mm-hmm.
So Courtney, why don't you continue the conversation and share
Yeah.
with us some of the challenges and rewards at the United Way?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that one of the biggest challenges, even though we have about half of our staff participating, I would love to see 100% of our staff be part of this conversation. And so I think that sometimes the participation can be hard, but it's important to recognize that if somebody's not ready to have this conversation or they're not ready to engage, maybe it's not a passion of theirs, then we don't want to push them into the conversations, because I think that just creates resentment for some of the things that we're trying to accomplish. So I would say that's one of the hardest things. And then what we do though is our diversity, equity, and inclusion work group will put together, they'll do a lot of research and put together different activities or trainings, and then we bring them to our staff meetings. And every month it's a report out at a staff meeting about what's been occurring. We recently did a field trip. This is probably one of the most rewarding things that we've done so far, but a field trip to see the Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune statue. And so that was just amazing. The opportunity for us to kind of walk through, it was a self-guided tour to experience the statue as a group. People who are not part of our DEI work group attended with us. And I thought that that was a really great first step. The conversations that we've been having are really paying off. And it was, I think, just a really enlightening experience to be able to go through that with our team. So to me, that was extremely rewarding. We've also implemented quite a bit into our board training. So we've added a position to our executive committee for a diversity, equity, and inclusion chair, which is Dr. Weems for our board this year. And it's a great opportunity for our board to understand that this isn't just a compliance piece. And I think that was great that she mentioned that, because at our recent board retreat, we did have a presentation from Nick Prince at the school district about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And he said, is it compliance or is it commitment? And United Way Worldwide requires us to do at least 7 hours of training per staff member each year and 2 hours of training per board member each year. But we don't want to stop there. It's great to be able to check the box, and I'm glad that we can make that happen. But we are actually offering, I think we've offered over 15 hours of opportunities so far this year for people to engage in these conversations and self-reflective activities. So we want to go way beyond the compliance requirement and really show commitment to our organization's goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion for the community.
Thank you, Courtney. And as being a member of that board and involved in the challenges that Courtney has presented to us today, I find that it's more of me involving myself out of curiosity, complemented by commitment. What else can I learn? What else can I share? Where else can this conversation take me? So I think prompting the involvement of both staff and board members, really comes out of our own curiosity and just a lot of self-reflection. So Courtney, I appreciate your leadership there. I also represent Daytona State College, and we also have a huge initiative regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we started that conversation before this became a movement, if you will, by really looking at belonging. And so I noticed that your tag is diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And our tagline at Daytona State College is "You belong here." And so everything revolves around the notion of, this is this acceptance, letting everyone know that this is the right choice, you belong here. And then there's an environment that embraces you. So I like that notion of belonging. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. So Jennifer, you've been on this journey for a while. You said you mentioned 3 years that you all started your journey. So why don't you share with us some of those challenges and those rewards as well?
So I think that some of our challenges where we are on the journey, and we acknowledge we're just beginning. This is a long journey, but really explaining the concept of intersectionality and how certain groups, how those cross. That's really been a difficult conversation, difficult kind of concept to grasp. Also, as you go through your own journey of self-reflecting, you really lean into, again, those uncomfortable topics that just force us to grow as human beings. You start acknowledging things that you didn't know before. So while you're on this journey of doing better, you start acknowledging systemic racism. Okay, it's a thing. And I grew up in this society with all this white privilege, and I had a blind eye to these things that were occurring that I wasn't aware of, and I was a part of that. That's a lot. That's a lot. And depending on, and acknowledging that we're all on different journeys in our life and have different support system, to start having these realizations and these opportunities to talk about with your coworkers and want to do better, and then go home to families that were also raised in that same system that supports racism. It's hard. And so I think we have to be prepared for that, and be willing to have those hard conversations. So that really was the most challenging part. I think the easiest part, or the most rewarding part, I agree with Courtney, was the buy-in. Everyone buys into the concept, can say, no, we're not going to check a box, we're committed, we're going to do this. It does get hard along the way when these tough topics come up. And if you're on this call, if you normally attend One Voice meetings in some way, shape, or form, you represent your agency. Your agency, your business has trusted you to be a representative of your company. So as your businesses, as your companies start embarking on these journeys, you'll be part of that leadership, where when that hard stuff comes up, you want to make sure you're in a good place to be prepared, because those conversations are coming. The most rewarding part, I would think, are the aha moments. Just that concept of belonging. Who doesn't want to belong? Everybody wants to belong. So when you've gone through this and you've had those tough conversations, and tears are shed and frustrations are shared, and wow, okay, I didn't see that way before, and now I do, and so I want to do better, and I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know where to go get that information. It's so beautiful and rewarding when you're with someone on that journey, especially exciting to know when it's your agency that's reaping the benefits of that.
So Jennifer, you talked a little bit about those conversations, and we recognize that when we embark on this type of a journey, where we're going to talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, or equity, that someone in the room will be uncomfortable. It could be the person telling his or her story, like Akbar did. I mean, that's not easy to do, to reveal and to be transparent in talking about how diversity, equity, and inclusion, or belonging impacted you as an individual, particularly if you're a member of a marginal community. So that's not easy.
Right.
And then it's hard for people who are experiencing that aha, as you indicated, Jennifer. I never knew, I never realized that. Perhaps I'm embarrassed because I'm a party to that,
Right.
or I've never spoke up. So there are difficult conversations to be expected whenever you embark on a notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion in mixed company. So Jennifer, why don't you continue that conversation for us and talk a little bit about how you handle those difficult conversations?
Right. And so I really think that we were able to embrace the learning because we chose to embrace those mistakes when they happened. I think a really common mistake is to, when those situations occur, is to allow the minority in the room to teach the rest of the room, right? That seems like a natural thing to do. Wow, what a lot of pressure to put on someone. Is it the minority in the room? Is it their job to explain how that was offensive? We stumbled across that. We leaned into the uncomfortable, and thankfully we got better as we went along the way, and realized that those that were in positions of privilege, and when you're in a work setting, also the differential of power too. Having to admit, okay, I went about that the wrong way. I need to go get more information. I need to figure out how can we do this so that I can learn better, so that I can do better next time.
Sure. Thank you,
So I think
Jennifer.
honesty, just being really honest, but also not relying on those that are in the minority to be the ones to educate the rest of the group.
So there are themes emerging: honesty, transparency. So that's helpful, Jennifer, to understand that we need to probably be a little armed so that we can be comfortable moving into these conversations. So Agba, can you share with us some of those really difficult conversations, particularly in your role as an HR director? How have you handled those conversations?
So I have to start by saying, even though I am in HR, I don't have HR background whatsoever. I am a CPA. I have a strong financial background. So when we started and launched into our DIB journey, we wanted to have the same open and honest dialogues, not just with our stakeholders, but also with our teammates. So while we had direct access to our leadership, we had several conversations with them. We knew we had their buy-in. We knew it was equally important for us to hear from our teammates. So we, as a task force, came up with this idea of hosting what we called belonging sessions. And these sessions, we wanted to have no more than 20 to 25 teammates join at a time. We purposely wanted to keep that group small because we wanted those dialogues to occur. We didn't want people to get lost in a large group. Every member of the DIB task force would be in attendance, and no one from our executive leadership team or senior leadership team, we didn't want anybody from that team to attend. We wanted to provide an open space for our teammates to share their thoughts. I can tell you, even amongst our task force, there were several individuals who were not comfortable with having these conversations or these sessions or hosting them without being armed, like you said, right? There were several concerns, especially as it relates to employment practices, right? What if we get comments that are, we're legally obligated to report it to our legal team? So we had a discussion with our legal team before we, started hosting these sessions. After some discussions, we decided we needed to have somebody from our HR team with HR background to host this session, as they're well equipped to handle some of those conversations if it went towards any employment practices matter. We also added disclaimers at the very beginning of all the conversations that these will be strictly confidential unless you share any information that violates Brown & Brown's code of conduct. And in that case, we will take that to the legal team. So we were very transparent in that regard. The session itself, the conversation centered around belonging. What does belonging mean to you? Tell us about a time when you felt like you belonged. Also tell us about a time when you felt like you didn't belong. How can we foster a culture of belonging at Brown & Brown? So those were some of the questions that we started with, very basic. The idea was to connect people on the same platform, get them talking, and then glean some ideas from these discussions that will help us develop our strategy and further our strategy. I have to say, we had some sessions where it was hard to get the audience to speak up, right? Because when you get 25 strangers together and you're asking them these really important questions, people don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to share. So what we did as task force members, we all joined the sessions, right? So we came prepared to share our personal stories. So if a question was posed, nobody said a word. we started our story, right? We started sharing. So that encouraged people to follow suit, and then they started sharing their stories. We made sure our stories were generic as opposed to related to the work environment, because that's where we wanted the conversations to go. We had sessions where one person dominated the entire conversation. We had sessions where people cried. We had just some great sessions and received nothing but positive feedback after each and every session. So I would say, as you all prepare to have these conversations, get yourself armed, like Dr. Williams said, like Jennifer said. Do your research, plan for all the what if scenarios, such that you don't go in, empty-handed. So you are armed and equipped.
So thank you, Ha. I'm hearing so many themes coming out of your experiences. We started with honesty and transparency. I'm hearing that, creating a comfortable environment is important, ensuring some sense of confidentiality, perhaps fostering a climate. And if you foster a culture, Ha, you're talking about a commitment over time. Right. So how long does it take to foster a culture?
It can't happen overnight, that's for sure.
Right, exactly. And then I'm hearing, you didn't use the term yet, but I'm hearing trust. That if you're bringing 25 people into a room to have what we may perceive to be a difficult conversation, some boundaries have to be established. And I think there has to be a sense of trust in that environment for people to share vulnerabilities and to be okay with sharing vulnerabilities and understanding that within that circle, it's a safe place. And I know that when Nick Prince did our board orientation at the United Way, he really emphasized creating those safe places whereby these conversations can take place. So that these are very insightful tidbits, and I'm taking notes, and I hope all of you out there are doing the same. It's a great conversation. So Courtney, why don't you share with us how you've handled, or how your organization has handled, some of these difficult conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. So that part about creating trust, creating a safe space is really important. When Francine opens our meetings, and if she says, okay, guys, today's a kumbaya meeting, I'm immediately a little bit on guard, because to me, that's room for people to share, and you have no idea what's going to come out of their mouths, or if somebody's having a rough day and they really need to get something off their chest that they've been experiencing. To Abba's point, if I'm going to hear something that's going to make me take action as the president of the organization because somebody's experienced something negative here, all of that runs through my head, and I immediately am like really nervous. But I would say having somebody as a facilitator who can help to foster those conversations can keep them on track and help people guide them in a way that's constructive is extremely helpful. And our team is really good at that. But when you first started the question, I was thinking of two specific instances in the last year. One where we started a conversation about white privilege in our group. And immediately somebody spoke up and said, well, I really have something to say about that phrase. I don't like those words. I don't think that that's true. One, the fact that they felt comfortable enough to actually voice that, I felt was pretty good. But then two, the fact that they listened then to the rest of the group as they talked through and worked through what exactly does white privilege mean? What are examples of that in everyday culture? Is that something that you see? Is it something from your family? And that's how you were raised. And so that's all that you've thought is the way that things should go. I think that those difficult conversations, if we allow ourselves the grace and the ability to be wrong sometimes, but to change our minds and then not hold that against each other, is a really big aspect to what's been so successful with our group. So I thought that sharing that time, the strength that I saw my entire team show during that conversation to be able to respond and not get angry, but to provide some kind of loving, constructive conversation was really valuable. And those are the times when Francine says, see, I got this. You don't have to worry. We're going to be okay. The other thing is that we don't just focus on race in our DEI work group, but we also talk about disability and LGBTQ plus issues. We are talking about, there's just a lot that we try to cover within it. And so in a couple of meetings, when we had people who were willing to step up and say, I struggle with dyslexia. You know, I identify as a lesbian, and I thought, wow, that's awesome that there's that trust and that connection built already, that they feel like they can share bring their full selves to work, honestly. And that's something that we're really trying to hone in on and advocate for our team. It's not easy. You have to be able to give yourself the chance to screw up, but to then turn around and do what needs to be done to make up for it. Apologize to somebody if you've said something, or be willing to really dive into a conversation to get to the root issue of it. And what's awesome is that I've been able to take these same conversations and then have them with my kids at home. When they're saying, well, is it important for us to listen to those books or to read those books or listen to those podcasts? Well, yeah, just because it doesn't affect you directly, you're not somebody who's being discriminated against, doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes so that you might have a better understanding of what they're going through. And that's always been really valuable for our group as well.
I'm hearing
I love that you said that, Courtney.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
I love that you said that, Courtney, because it kind of prompted for me. That definitely was something that we struggled with too. For example, we have supervision. So when you have direct service staff, supervision is a pretty common thing, a pretty regular thing. So you have a person in power and then a direct service staff. But in those relationships, is diversity, is equity, is inclusion, is that becoming a part of it? And so we were doing a role play, and I had a say mid-30s Caucasian female, and then an 80-something-year-old Caucasian female. And I asked them to talk about, get together, what are the differences? How would you have a conversation about what our differences are? And they came back, I'm not kidding, and said, we have no differences. We're both white and we're both Christian. I was like, she has grandkids older than you. Oh, age. Okay. So like, that's a thing too. Yep, that's a thing too. So like, there's like aha moments, I think helped, because I think we missed a big piece that probably will come up in the breakout rooms, is the political piece of this. There's no way for us to ignore the fact that everything that's going on in our country, this has become politicized. And like, if you really want to start an argument at work, just start talking about politics. I'm joking, and I do not advise you discuss politics at work. But this issue being politicized is just, I think, honestly, an easy way to not have the hard conversations. And so I don't put up with it. I'm not okay with that. But to deal with those conversations. So if I'm a female supervisor and I have a male staff reporting to me, having those conversations, there is a difference. We're two different sexes. And so that is something to talk about. It's going to impact our communication. It's going to impact our perspectives, the way we see the world. And so thanks for bringing that up, Courtney. That reminded me of the whole political thing. This is not a political issue. Making it political is a great excuse to not do the hard work.
But there are things, again, I'm hearing some additional themes in those contexts where these difficult conversations, where these conversations may take place, that can be difficult or not, but the conversations, everyone enters the room with a set of assumptions. And I think we respect those assumptions. Everyone has opinions, and opinions are put out there so they can be challenged, and that's a good thing. I hear when Courtney talks about the work that the team at the United Way has been doing, and what all of you have said, research goes into these, being informed. So going into these conversations with research or with information. Experience is good, but research also proves to be the turning corner for many people when they say the data says, this is your experience, and then the data supports your experience. But what I've not heard yet is judgment. And I don't know what the role of judgment is in those contexts where those difficult conversations take place. So in 2 minutes, in 2 seconds, actually, before we go into the break, can any of you three talk about judgment and what the role of judgment is in these contexts where these conversations take place? Anyone?
I guess in 2 seconds, it'd be no judgment.
I think that's perfect. We're going to break into our breakout rooms now, and each of you are going to be, as Abha talked about in her initial conversation, you're going to be meeting in a room with people that you may not even know. So you're in a room with strangers, and we're asking you to have a conversation. But I would like to focus this conversation around what we've heard today. You know, if you can share what inspired you as you listened to each of these panelists. If you remember in the beginning, we talked about the goal is to be curious, to provoke inspiration, and then to, you know, look at aspiration. So what inspired you as you listened to these panelists? Maybe you can share in your breakout groups what left you curious, you know, what can we offer as a second conversation, you know, that would kind of continue that journey for you. And then also in your groups, if you can talk about what you can use from this experience in terms of how you can inform your own diversity, equity, and inclusion or belonging initiatives, you know, that would be very helpful. Sharing your feedback to this group in the chat would be great, because then when we reconvene, we can look at some of the comments that you have expressed in the chat and maybe pick up a few of those. But most importantly, we'd like for you to come back with aha moments. And that's what we really want to come away with today. What light bulb went off in your head as a result of the panelists' conversation or the conversations that you had in your chat? So I ask that when you go into your groups that you appoint very quickly someone to monitor your time, which will be about 10 minutes, and then also to have someone moderate your group so that they can move the group along according to those 3 questions. Again, what inspired you as you listened to today's panelists? What left you curious? And finally, what can you use from this experience to advance your own DEI or DEB initiatives? So at this point, we're going to move into those groups. You're going to identify your moderator and your timekeeper, and we'll see you back here at about 10:55. Great, thank you.
Excellent job, ladies.
Thank you.
It's fun, yeah. I can't read the chat, Francine. I see it, but I can't.
Okay, I have everything ready for you. So when you come back, I broke it up into questions, into comments, and into resources. So whenever you're ready, you just let me know.
Yeah, I can't see with, I need different glasses, and that would be crazy looking to see if I start switching glasses. So how will you provide that for me? Can you send me an email?
I can
All
do
right,
that right now.
All right, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like for me to emphasize when we wrap up, ladies? Something that I may not have addressed or something you want me to reinforce?
I think you're doing a great job summarizing along the way.
The only thing is you do need to speak up, Dr. Weems. You're very, very low and it's hard to hear you.
Oh my goodness, I'm trying. I had the tech in here. I had some support in here earlier to see where my volume was, and they said it was on high. So I'm not quite sure. I'm sorry. I'll speak. I'll try a little louder. Yikes.
The only other thing that I would want to mention is like the leadership that's come up in our group. So if you're trying to make a business case for why a DEI or DIB initiative is important, just the leadership that I've seen from my team and how people have been able to grow in their positions because they're kind of exercising that through this work group. That's just one other thing that I wanted to point out.
And I also think what's important is that you're going, and Jim pointed this out in the chat, you get less turnover, employee turnover, because people feel valued.
Right.
And I just sent you the information, Dr. Weems.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing that.
I'm going to jump into, can I jump into a chat?
Sure.
I turned off mine. How can I get back in there? Breakout rooms, okay.
So Abha, I'm going to share right now. There are some specific questions. Are you able to share your survey? Can you send a policy of the floating holiday? And someone has provided their email. Other comments, I like the idea of the floating holiday. And then I have a question for Abha about the floating holiday. And the question is, how do you reconcile the fact that our calendar in the United States is inherently Christian? Saturdays and Sundays, etc., are part of many people's weekends, and most businesses are closed on Christmas. Thus, a floating holiday seems to continue to privilege Christians. They already get Christian holidays plus their day of choice. And then the non-Christians just select one day for an observance that's important to them. So that was a comment. I don't know if you want me to bring that to the table.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'd be happy to answer that.
Okay. And then how does the task force function? That was another question.
Yeah, I can answer that too. The other two that you talked about, can we share our survey responses and can we share our Culture Day floating holiday policy? If you don't mind, Francine, if I can get the email addresses for those individuals, I can probably get, directly respond to them separately.
Okay.
And we can mention that maybe, Dr. Weems, that we got these two requests and I'll respond directly to them.
Excellent. And then someone is sorry, Abha, that you went through what you went through, but you seem to have been able to turn a negative into a positive. As Courtney speaks, the word that comes to mind is grace. And someone says they're loving the conversation, self-love, how important these concepts are. Thank you so much for this experience. When we breed grace and trust, the result is employee longevity and less turnover. And then another comment is the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson is an excellent resource.
Ooh, I'm listening to another book by her right now called Warmth of Other Suns, and it's amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
And then, yes, Isabel Wilkerson. And then Jennifer, would you please share the title of the book you used? So you want to talk about race. And then Courtney, finally, what resources have you used to execute trainings? And then they've said that we've begun to draw on experts in the community to speak, webinars, trainings that we found, videos, they've been really helpful, but they don't need to be long. Some of the most impactful conversations have come from 5-minute videos or less.
Yeah, I had responded and answered them. And then I also think that Carrie went ahead and put the link to the book in the chat, Jen. So I don't know that you'd need to address it at the end. Yeah.
And then the last comment is in the meeting recap, which is in about 2 minutes. Is it possible for the panelists to share the resources that they've used? Books, videos, and links. So how would you like to handle that?
Maybe.
Well, there is one way we could handle it. I'm sorry, Courtney, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask Carrie if it would be possible for us to maybe send a link out with some things compiled, an email out to them.
Absolutely. We typically send a follow-up email with things like that. So it's perfect.
Okay, good.
Great.
And Abba, I can't see the email addresses of everyone, so I only have the questions and the names. So Carrie, you're going to have to provide the email addresses, if that's possible.
It depends how people have logged in, but most will have emails.
Okay.
Francine, I think it was Taylor Duguay that
Yes.
asked, and then Nancy Walsh from Early Learning Coalition. So there should be pretty easy to get to.
Oh, Linda just gave us the email.
Okay, great. So we're gonna pop right on again.
Okay, are we ready?
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes. Okay.
Well, welcome back. We had a great break. We had a chance to recap a little bit and share with amongst ourselves what we even learned, and reflected a little bit on the chat and the comments in the chat. So I will share with you before we ask for your feedback on your aha moments that to your questions thus far, we will be able to provide links and resources and materials in the meeting follow-up. There were several questions that were directed to ABBA and regarding policies, and some questions about, the floating holidays, et cetera, and how the task force functioned. And ABBA said that she'd be more than happy to provide that response as well. So we'll put that in the follow-up narrative. And then finally, there was a question about the videos, the links, and the books that we've all referred to, that were referred to during this conversation. And again, we'll make sure that we put those in the follow-up detail for this meeting. So we have about 2 minutes to kind of reflect on your experiences in your work groups, in your breakout groups. And we wanted to hear from you regarding your aha moments. So would someone like to share, or can we go right to the chat? And
I don't mind sharing for our group.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, so some of the things that inspired or were aha moments for our group were number one, the number of people on the call. This is obviously very important to a lot of people, that to have almost 100 people on the call. And then also a lot of people were talking about the idea of the floating holiday, and not only a great idea, but also the fact that there is actually controversy around it, that you would think that it would be something that many people would appreciate and be ready to move forward with. But does that also mean you take away a holiday somewhere else, and people's feelings around what holiday do you take away if that's the option? And so that was really interesting to hear about. And just overall the testimony about how each of the organizations represented here today, it starts with having honest conversation. And if you can't have that honest conversation, you're not going to move forward. I think that last, to wrap it up, it's, kind of the now what. We've had these conversations and continue to do that. So what is next for some of us, and maybe all of us?
Great, thank you.
And we have from Megan, great breakout sessions. Love learning about people's journey on learning, and great conversations. And for Jessica, their group talked about being inspired to have more conversation with staff, but even also our own families, to be more intentional about building trust. And Abba's immigration story, hearing about diverse companies, DEI journeys, and having opportunities to learn from each other, and to learn more about book clubs, floating holidays, and field trips. The list goes on, and this is great about belongingness. And so I feel that people are listening.
Can I just make a comment, Dr. Weems and Francine? And thank you everyone for comments. There was a comment about floating holiday. So I just wanted to mention that we did not take away any other holiday from the calendar. We just added a floating holiday on top of our existing holiday calendar. There was a comment in the chat about inherently giving additional privilege to Christians by allowing another holiday. So I just want to make a comment there. Our goal when we were planning for this floating holiday was not to take away anything from anybody, or we were not focused on whether we were offering another day to Christians. Let's just say that. We were focused on what can we do for the minorities. And let's just be honest. I mean, we can't reconcile the calendar in the United States. It is primarily, it emphasizes Christian holidays. That's not for us to reconcile. That's for our politicians to figure out. What we were trying to do was just serve our teammates, and how best could we serve them.
So the last thing that I heard was politicizing and policy. So depart from politicizing, changes can be made through policy. So hopefully that's something that we can add to the takeaway list as you look and reflect on what can be done in your organizations. It's been a great morning. And every time I meet with my colleagues here, I learn more. And it's always a pleasure to engage with them. I thank you all for joining us this morning. It's been an informed morning. I think this panel has accomplished the goal of elevating the conversation. Thank you for doing that. We thank our host of One Voice for Volusia and sponsor. And of course, we thank the United Way for being the presenter at this time. So as we close, I want to share with you that Jennifer has agreed to be in a resource room if anyone would like to continue the discussion or discuss any unresolved challenges following this discussion. So Jennifer will be available to be in the resource room should you desire to take advantage of that opportunity. But again, thank you all for joining us, all 100 plus of you for joining us this morning. It's been a great conversation. I hope that this will be the first of many, especially as we look at the United Way. Engaging in community conversations is our goal. So we hope to do more of this in different venues. And I hope you'll do the same. So thank you all this morning and have a great day.